Hello everyone, welcome to UPSCprep.com. I'm Shagun Singh, and as you must have guessed from the title of this video is going to be about how exactly is it that you build comprehension as a skill. Secondly, what are the sources that you can refer to? How exactly is it that comprehension as a skill goes beyond the CSAT paper and is beneficial for you apart from that? So what you can expect from this video before I start, let me just quickly go through all the points. Number one, we'll first of all shed light on why comprehension as a skill is important. Secondly, we'll talk about the three pillars of the skill of comprehension. Where exactly do students get stuck and how exactly is it that you rectify that situation? Third would be the atomic step towards a skill, and training to the finals 2024 would be fourth. So without wasting any time, let me just get straight into number one, which is why comprehension as a skill is important. Now, one pedagogy that I take in my class is the understanding that reading comprehension, of course, is a skill that you need to, let's say, get a certain amount of marks in CSAT. And how do you get that? I've covered extensively in the previous video. But the understanding that I definitely try to get across to my students is that reading comprehension as a skill is not just limited to CSAT, because that won't get you the kind of output that you require. So, for example, UPSC is a game of knowing a lot of information and knowing the exact information too, right? You have to know what, let's say, a certain scheme is about. You also have to know why is the scheme there, who is it targeting, let's say, what are the other schemes that existed before this. So it's an understanding of a wide information, let's say, portfolio. We can call it that. So reading comprehension is a skill. What does it do? It helps you in the retention of that information, of course. Second, if you do the process of reading comprehension strategically, मतलब अगर आपने सोचा कि मैं पढ़ने के लिए नहीं पढ़ रहा हूँ, मैं कुछ इससे आउटपुट निकालने के लिए पढ़ रहा हूँ, your understanding of your subjects will increase drastically. And if your understanding increases, that obviously helps you in other papers. So this is something that we will be talking about this in this video, and this is something that I also strategically put in all of the classes that I take at UPSC Essential for CSAT specifically for reading comprehension, is that we will teach and we will learn reading comprehension as a skill so that it helps you in GS, it helps you in essay, it helps you in imbibing information, right? So now that we've discussed, okay, reading comprehension, important क्यों है? Comprehension, ये skill important क्यों है? Let's also talk about the pillars, right? I also talked about the pillars. So there are three problems that I've seen when it comes to comprehension that students essentially face, right? Number one, you understand English pretty well. आपको English आती है. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको English नहीं आती. But vocabulary that is used in certain editorials, let's say, that throw you. And because they throw you, you get intimidated. So that's one problem. Number two, for you, some reads are easier to comprehend than others. ऑब्वियस सी बात है कि एक एनसीईआरटी आपको बहुत ज्यादा इजी लगेगी एज कंपेयर टू लेट्स से एन एकेडमिक रीड, है ना? आप अगर किसी ऑथर की किताब पढ़ोगे एज कंपेयर टू अ समरी, obviously the author's book will be more difficult because the context is more complex there, right? So when we talk about some reads are easier to comprehend than others, why is it that, and how do you actually tackle this? This is something that we will talk about in this video. Third, सब सही है बट योर स्पीड इज स्लो. अब स्पीड स्लो होती है तो क्या होता है? आप एक एडिटोरियल लेके बैठते हो, यू स्टार्ट रीडिंग इट, एंड देन यू रियलाइज आपने 20 मिनट तो एक ही एडिटोरियल पे लगा दिया, एंड उसमें से आपको how much were you able to retain? Let's say 0.5% of the editorial. We'll discuss why does that happen, so that by the time, let's say, we reach to 2024, reading comprehension becomes like a habit. It's a practiced habit for you. So when you walk into the paper, it won't get difficult for you to actually crack those questions with the right kind of techniques, because you're so used to it. You're so used to, facing unseen passages every single day. That's the point of it. That's the point of UPSC, right? You train and you train and you train until you reach the day, and it's the easiest thing on the planet for you. Cool. So let's talk about the first understanding of vocabulary. A lot of videos that I've also seen when it comes to, enhancing vocabulary, they will tell you, एक book ले लो, take a book and take these list of words, view them daily, and that way your vocabulary will increase, right? अब दो चीज समझ लो. You are not here to give an exam of, let's say, difficult words, right? That's not what the exam is about. The exam is about comprehension. What is comprehension? The ability to synthesize complex information into information that you can actually retain, into information that you can actually understand, right? It's not a game of आपको सबसे difficult words आते कि नहीं आते. So it makes no sense to, let's say, take out a list of words and try and rote learn them. What happens because of that, when you rote learn for vocabulary, your learning experience will die, absolutely die. And remember, I don't think I need to tell you this. UPSC has so much information anyway that you need to know, that you need to imbibe. Why would you waste your time on rote learning like new words, rote learning difficult words, that is? So what I would say is to get vocabulary and understanding that 2024 is 10 months away, which is ample amount of time to learn the skill, is you need to be familiar with the language. How are you familiar with the language? By obviously reading more. But this is not where people actually end it. कि ज़्यादा पढ़ो आपकी vocabulary ज़्यादा ही increase होगी. ऐसे नहीं increase होती है. People read a lot. There will be a lot of people who read a lot, but their vocabulary increases, let's say, in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years time. We don't have that much time. We have 10 months. So what can we do? We make it a creative process. We make it a process which is exciting for us to do. We make it a process that adds to our learning experience, right? हम जितना creative होंगे, उतना ही हमें याद रहेगा और उतना ही हमें मजा आएगा, right? So what happens is, let's say you're reading an editorial, let's say आपने science reporter उठाई और आपने कोई अच्छा सा उसमें से पैसेज लिया और उस पैसेज में आपको 2-3 शब्द ऐसे लगे जो आपने पहले कभी यूज नहीं किए थे. You've never seen them before. Now the understanding is to take that editorial, form a question in your head. Let's say if the editorial is about inflation, form a question about what is inflation. Take PYQs. If you see your PYQs in economics, there are several questions that you can find. Take one of those questions, watch the editorial, read it, and try and take the words that you have seen in the editorial which are new to you and utilize that in that answer. What happens here is, आपने creativity लगा दी, तो automatically आपके लिए process exciting हो जाएगा. और जैसे ही आप किसी creative चीज को करते हो, it just becomes easier for you to understand everything. It becomes easier for you to store that vocabulary in a passive place. आप एक pool की तरह हो जाएगी आपकी vocabulary फिर. So when you're writing, you can just fish for new words, which is essentially what you want when you're reading or learning a new language, right? You need to access a pool of information, and that pool can only get created if you're creative with it. Okay? So number one is this. Number two is communicate, right? You guys, if you don't want to write answers, I would highly suggest you do. But if you don't even want to do that, obviously you guys are on YouTube. Obviously you guys are on Instagram. There's no way that you guys are not on social media. Obviously you guys are on Telegram. What you can do is start utilizing words which you've seen, let's say, in that day in one contextual experience. So let's say आपने आज ही कोई भी editorial पढ़ा है, उसमें से कोई नया शब्द देखा है, comment below what was that new word, or comment a sentence, comment a word, comment like whatever you want to do with that word down below, so that that experience stays with you. When that experience stays with you, that word will become your passive vocabulary, which means you can access it whenever you want, right? And because it's a creative experience, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's what I would say. Exercises karo, do exercises like this, which help you in the general understanding of, let's say, cracking a paper. essays लिखोगे, उसमें vocabulary का काम साथ में करोगे, तभी help करेगी आपको. vocab को लेके rote learn करोगे, it won't help you. Okay, so I hope vocab is one thing that is sorted for you guys. Let's talk about the second thing. The second problem that I've seen is that some texts, people find some texts easier to understand than the others, which is a natural process. It's true for me too. NCERT will probably take me like 2 hours to complete. And if I'm being generous with that, 2 hours is a lot of time for me to complete. As compared to, let's say, an academic read, which would take, अगर 100 pages की भी होगी, हो सकता है मुझे पूरा पूरा दिन लग जाए या 2 दिन लग जाए, because the content there is complex, right? So let's एक बार go through the process. What do you do when you read? Compare it with an NCERT, go to an academic read and see how is it that you can increase your speed and your registration and retention of that information as well as your comprehension. Because comprehension is a game of what? Comprehension is a game of understanding. The more you understand, the more you retain. Cool. So what happens is, you take a page. Whenever you take a page, you read the information. Some information gets registered. Now, how do you know that information is registered? Because you're able to utilize that further. अगर आप utilize ही नहीं कर पा रहे हो, if you're not able to bring this information in a conversation, if you're not able to bring this information, let's say in a debate, let's say आप चाय पी रहे हो अपने aspirant दोस्तों के साथ, उस वक्त नहीं बोल पाए, तो आपकी पढ़ाई नहीं है, because you're not able to actually utilize that information further. What happens is, you're aggressively getting information and that information just stays here. It doesn't seep back, which is the problem. So let's talk about number one, NCERT में, why is it easier? First of all, if you read NCERTs, you know there's an index. Index होता है. Index में आपको general idea पता चल जाता है कि okay, this chapter is going to be about, let's say, Chinese leadership, or let's say the Asian understanding or the Asian context in geopolitics right now. You understand that. So when you start reading, you already have, let's say, sort of a primed information about it. So your brain is more ready to accept whatever's coming at you. You're already eager to accept it. Secondly, because NCERTs are designed for school students, the text is deliberately arranged for better understanding. Let me demonstrate this. Let me read this. The Chinese leadership took the major policy decisions in 1970s. So what is it saying? That Chinese leadership took major policy decisions in 1970s. Is that complex? No. Is that hard to understand? Absolutely not. What are they saying? कि Chinese leadership ने major policy decisions लिए 1970s में. अब क्या होता है? They primed you for the complex information that will come after that, which is the policy decisions that they've taken. They already told you that policy decisions उन्होंने लिया है. उसके बाद वो एक के बाद एक policy decisions आपको बताते हैं. So your brain is more ready, more receptive to take that information. And this is by design, by the way. Teachers who design the NCERTs, they know that they're dealing with students. They know that they're dealing with varied attention spans and focus. So they make the text easier for you to decipher. Similarly, language also. If you say the Chinese leadership took major policy decisions in the 1970s, you don't need to take a major pause here. You automatically understand कि policy decisions की बात हो रही है. So the language allows you to take shorter pauses and for you to comprehend it easily. Now let's come to an academic read. Ex-ante stimulations. Okay. Automatically you don't know what this is about. So anyway, your brain will be like, oh, this is new information. This is new uncharted territory. It will be cautious. Now, if it's cautious, what happens is seamless information passing, that doesn't allow it to happen. So if you start reading, ex-ante simulations are evaluations that use available data to stimulate expected effects of a program or policy reform or outcomes of interest. Now, first line, let's say, okay, easy. But after that, it just starts becoming more and more complex because they're trying to explain to you something that happens, let's say, in policy reform or outcome of interest, which is something which is new to you. So because the language is far more complex, because you're learning completely new information, you have to reread. And whenever you have to reread, that takes up a lot of time. If that takes up a lot of time, what does it do? It mounts up frustration. And when it mounts up frustration, when you're frustrated, I bet you will not be able to retain, understand, take in any information, no matter what, because you're not allowing that information to pass through. This is why academic reads are a little bit more tougher to actually imbibe. But what is the good news? The good news in UPSC is इतने complex readings भी नहीं आती है. Okay? The most complex that you can possibly get is, let's say, Lakshmikant, but that's complex because it's content heavy. It's telling you a lot of new stuff. It's not giving you extremely difficult concepts, right? Secondly, when it comes to, let's say, editorials, even there, the information is still easier to understand unless and until, let's say, आप कोई economics का पढ़ रहे हो और repo rate है और आपको repo rate के बारे में कोई भी idea नहीं है. But even editorials are made kept in mind that it is going to a wider audience, right? It's a newspaper. They will not write it in the most stylistic manner because they know academicians are not reading it. So that's a good news. Secondly, you know this. So आपको पता है कि आपकी good news ये है कि इतने भी complex reads नहीं आएंगे, पर complex होगा, आप उसको break down कैसे करें? So couple of strategies that you can use while you're doing, obviously, reading comprehension in the paper. That's a completely different set of strategy, but it will help you when you reach 2024, when you're reaching in that CSAT paper. Here, you can use this strategy to become a more effective and efficient reader. So let's talk about it one by one. Number one, do not try to understand every single word in that paragraph. Now, पीछे जाते हैं. Up ex ante stimulations are evaluations that use available data to stimulate the expected effects of a program. If you read it like this, and if you try to understand हर एक शब्द, आप क्या कर रहे हो? You're giving 7 different indicators to your brain. So your brain is firing up at ex ante stimulations. Okay. It's firing up at evaluations. Okay. Available data. Okay. But it's not forming connections. वो इंडिविजुअल डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहा है, कनेक्शन नहीं फॉर्म हो रहा है. तो जब आप एक एक करके शब्द समझने की कोशिश करते हो, आपको वो पैसेज नहीं समझ आएगा क्योंकि आप बहुत ज्यादा डेटा पॉइंट्स अपने ब्रेन को दे रहे हो, राइट? इफ यू गिव योर ब्रेन टू मच इन्फॉर्मेशन, यू आर असॉल्टिंग इट विद इन्फॉर्मेशन, राइट? You need to thereby not focus on every single line, but focus on getting the general gist of what the author is trying to say. Okay. Second, skim first. When it comes to editorials, quickly skim through it. पढ़ो फटाफट 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 पढ़ो और देखो ओके बोलना क्या चाह रहा था ऑथर इसमें, वो समझो. जनरल जैसे बिग पिक्चर आपको अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो जाती है. What happens is then when you're actually reading it, because there's a pre-concept, because your brain is already primed to receive that information, आप ज्यादा अंडरस्टैंड करोगे. Think of it as a circle. आपने सर्कल का एक आउटलाइन बना दिया. When you read it further and you color it, you're coloring it and you're filling it with information. So prime your brain by skimming. Now, sub-vocalization. This is very important when it comes to the third pillar, which is speed, right? सब सही है, पर आपकी speed slow है. Sub-vocalization क्या होता है, पहले ये समझते हैं. So, when I am speaking to you like this, I am vocalizing. When I am reading like this, do not try to understand every single word in that paragraph, I'm sub-vocalizing, right? Which means the information that is in front of me, I'm muttering, so that I'm able to understand that easier. A lot of people say you will get faster in reading comprehension if you read everything in your brain, right? आप mutter नहीं करोगे out loud, आप बस ऐसे पढ़ोगे. Like you come here, do not, you just read it in your you comprehend it in your brain itself. पर इसमें क्या होता है, आपको ये इसमें obviously आपकी speed तो increase हो जाएगी, but you won't be able to retain that information. You won't be able to understand it as quickly. It might take you 2 or 3 reads to just get through the same kind of information. And again, if you keep on repeating the same passage, if you keep on reading it again and again, and it takes you more time than it's required, frustration. What do you want to avoid? Frustration. Okay. So sub-vocalize, mutter while you're actually reading things, because that allows you to retain information. Second, now I understand that muttering might slow you down, but how do you actually counter that slowing down? Is by 2 things: grouping words together and change the reading speed by recognizing what is important and what is not. Here, you skim through the entire passage. If you've seen my previous video, I always say in passages when it comes to CSAT and UPSC, आपको ऐसे passages मिलेंगे जिसमें example से author अपना point prove करना चाहेगा, right? आपको ऐसे passages मिलेंगे. Now the idea is you've gotten all of this understanding, आपने skim कर लिया है, you've done all of that, तो आपको ये पता चल गया है कि इस passage में important क्या है और इस पैसेज में important क्या नहीं है. You understand that properly, right? So when you actually read to the passage, let's come here. You can read it like this. India has mostly been difficult of US large cheese. Okay, you read this. Now you read this in your brain, but it must offer the US something out of geopolitical balance. आपने मटर किया, मटर करके आपने रजिस्टर कर लिया. Now यहाँ से जो information आ रही है, New Delhi will be under pressure on Ukraine. This you can read without actually vocalizing, without muttering, because आपको जो सबसे important चीज समझनी थी, that India has mostly been a taker of US largesse or US gifts, but it must offer the US something outside of geopolitical balance. ये आपको समझ आ गई है. अब बाकी आपको पता है कि एग्जाम्पलीफाई करेगा, अंडरस्टैंडिंग देगा, तो इसकी 100% अंडरस्टैंडिंग लेने की जरूरत नहीं है आपको. You can read this in your head, right? This way, when you're grouping these things together, your speed increases and you don't compromise on your understanding, which are the two most important things. Lastly, pause. Take a second. Take a micro per second. Let that information register. As soon as it registers, then you move to the next sentence. If you don't allow yourself this process, again what happens is आप reading comprehension CSAT के पेपर में obviously 2-3 बार तो पढ़ोगे ही पढ़ोगे. But when you're reading information for UPSC, different articles, different things, it will become slower. You will become slower, which is something that you want to avoid. Plus, you will not be able to retain it. You will not be able to understand these things. You will not be able to actually reproduce stuff, which is essentially what is required in reading comprehension. Now, these are the strategies that you can use while you're actually comprehending, reading, and going through, let's say, even academic books. The seventh one, make mind maps. This is something that you can use for your GS. So I will not discuss this in detail because this video is about reading comprehension. But making mind maps also helps you in, let's say, you've read, you've retained the information. Mind maps will give you clarity of what that information is about. And we can talk about this detail in other videos, but in the process of reading comprehension, this is not as important. But in the process of, let's say, creatively creating outcomes, mind maps is definitely important. So we've discussed the strategy. We've discussed how do you tackle the vocabulary aspect. Let's also quickly talk about the sources. Number one, academic. Science reporter पढ़ो, Mint पढ़ो, Hindu Business Line पढ़ो, Hindu Indian Express editorials, Down to Earth magazine, Yojana and Kurukshetra. Read these things. When you read these things, you'll be able to better contextualize information. Now, a lot of people, what they do is they will just read the newspaper and they say, okay, I don't want to read the magazine. Fine, fair enough. Some people will only read the magazine. They will not read the newspaper. But like I've told you over and over again, if you're trying to read these aspects, first thing, CSAT के paper में reading comprehension से in papers में से काफी questions आते हैं. Second thing, use these papers as sources of content for your GS answers, for your essay answers. So the more you read these and the more you understand, you'll be able to actually replicate that when it comes to essays, ethics, anything that you're doing in GS. So this is a very good source of information for you to keep retaining and training. And like I said, it's a long race to 2024. लंबी रेस है, ये नहीं है कि रेस 1 मिनट में खत्म हो जाएगी. तो आप जितना अपने आप को enrich करोगे उतना better है. Another thing that I've seen people doing is whenever they have, let's say, they've read the Hindu Business Line and उसमें कुछ ऐसा article आया जो उनको समझ नहीं आ रहा. If you go on YouTube, you will find several people who are deciphering that article, who are trying to give you, okay, with UPSC, why is this more important? Again, what you're doing, you're not rote learning. आप अपने आप को एक experience दे रहे हो और उस experience से आप ज़्यादा याद रखोगे, right? So, I mean, this is the point of punishment also, right? If kids are punished, they are punished so that they remember that the bad thing that they did is actually bad. Similarly, with experiences, retention of information, like I've repeated over and over again, it increases and your learning experience will increase. बहुत लंबी रेस है यार, जितना फन बना सकते हो फन बनाओ. अब फन के एस्पेक्ट पे आ गए. So let's talk about the non-fiction sources. Language है, vocabulary का सबसे best तरीका है through books. I've read so many non-fiction books because of which my vocabulary passively increased, and I didn't even realize it one day while I was writing that I knew so many words because I loved reading fiction. So read fiction, watch movies. You can also use words like Word Power by Norman, if I'm not wrong. So that's a good book. But then again, you're not here to tick off a checklist of books. You're here to learn a skill. A skill is a daily training process. So that's what you need to do. Now, be an Olympian. This is what I say to everybody. This is what I say to anybody who's doing UPSC is that the best people to learn from are sportsmen, especially when it comes to UPSC, because they train and then they train and then they train again, despite understanding that when you reach the level of Olympians, you're already the best in the country. You've beaten several people in states, you've beaten several people before you, and then you've reached to the Olympian size. Even then, you know that you have to practice more and more and more and more and more to become better. So take smaller steps, take, let's say, only one article a day. And only one article a day, you do that small exercise. You don't even write an essay, you just write a paragraph. Atomic steps towards 2024 is what's going to help you at the end of the day to crack your prelims, to go through your mains, and to reproduce this really rich knowledge that you've inculcated in your interview. This is what determines your rank. This is what determines your answers and your game in UPSC, whether you pass through or whether you don't. So treat this as a skill inculcation exercise. This is something that I do in my UPSC Essential course as well, because I see comprehension as a skill which can actually help you further down the line. So I hope this video was informative. Thank you for watching. Please do the exercise, leave a comment, and I'll be going through all the comments later as well. Thank you, guys.